Squad. Special Agent Rojek oversees all criminal and national security cyber investigations that affect Southern Ohio. He has served in his current role since July of 2014. Prior to that, he spent time as the FBI headquarters supervisor addressing national security cyber matters. Prior to his time in the FBI headquarters, he spent 10 years in the FBI North Fork, Virginia field office, working primarily on cyber and foreign counterintelligence matters. Prior to the FBI, he was a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. Great job. Thank you for your service. From one veteran to another. 4 years as an artillery officer and 7 years, and we will hold this against him, as an intelligence officer. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. So I sat listening to the last presentation, and I took a lot of notes, and the things I really wrote down were how different was this presentation going to be from the last one. So I wrote, I'm going to use PowerPoint, because as you heard, I was an Army intelligence officer for 7 years, and PowerPoint is my medium for which I speak to the masses. When I was in Afghanistan, I did at least 2, if not 3 or 4 presentations a day. So I got very good at using PowerPoint, and it's really a crutch for me, but it's how I present. I'm going to stand at the podium. I try and move back and forth, but it doesn't always work for me. I have no sense of humor. So as much as I try, the old statement from Men in Black that we at the FBI have no sense of humor that we're aware of is actually true for me. I don't have a cool accent. And I'm here to try and scare the hell out of you. So the presentation that I'm going to give, you'll see a lot of the slides are probably for an audience with lesser intelligence when it comes to cyber intrusions and when it comes to information security than the groups that's sitting here. So some of the things I'll just glaze over because I know that you guys get it. And I don't have to rehash a lot of the things that I do when I normally give these presentations to companies where I'm really talking down to the user level. So the things I want you to think about as I'm giving this presentation, so the general themes are, one is educating the workforce. And that's the job of the security professionals, to understand that the weakest link that we have when we talk about cybersecurity is really the individual user. We can have the most sophisticated intrusion detection system, the most sophisticated firewalls that are available on the commercial market, but until we stop individual users from clicking on malicious links, opening up emails from any source that comes in to infect our systems, we're not going to be successful. The other unfortunate message is that a committed, well-funded adversary will compromise your network, no matter how sophisticated your system is. We see that time and time again, numerous examples. You see it in the news every day now with these major companies that are getting attacked that had sophisticated intrusion detection systems, that have sophisticated security professionals working at their companies, and yet they still get compromised. So one of the keys is to make yourself, to still have those systems in place, but to really make the next guy look more vulnerable than you are. And that's just an unfortunate reality in today's society. So I want to give you perspective about who we are as FBI Cincinnati. So I currently have 7 agents who work for me, and I currently sit in Cincinnati, but I do have agents here in the Columbus office as well, which is right around the corner from the Hyatt. 5 investigators. I have a new agent who just graduated from the academy who's reporting next Monday, and he's going to sit here in Columbus. That doesn't sound like a whole lot of people, and it's not. We're constantly begging for more personnel, more investigators, because this is a very significant threat, as you all know. I also have what's called the CART program, which is our computer forensics department, and I have 1 qualified forensic examiner and 2 trainees, one who's very close to being certified and another who's still about 2 years away with all the classes and certifications that she has to take. And proud to see that InfraGard is actually a sponsor of this event, but I also oversee the InfraGard coordinator and InfraGard program. And we actually have 3 chapters within the Cincinnati division, 1 in Cincinnati, 1 here in Columbus, and 1 in Dayton. And then the Cleveland division, which is to our north, they have at least one that I know of as well. You see I have 2 intelligence analysts. Both of those analysts sit here in Columbus because the previous supervisor prior to me actually sat in Columbus. 2 computer scientists. Computer scientists are relatively new to the FBI, but it's something that we're looking at expanding upon their capabilities. One of the things that we're dealing with right now is that the expectations that what the FBI wants in a computer scientist is up here. What they're willing to pay, unfortunately, is more down here. So the people that we're hiring are basically fresh out of college, have the book knowledge, the book smarts, but don't have the experience to back up that education. So we're getting them involved, and the basic guidance I give my computer scientists is figure out how to enhance the investigations of agents throughout the office. So not just on the cyber squad, but in every squad throughout the field office. The current FBI priorities. You see cyber sits third. But when you say cyber sits third, remember that cyber is really just a vector. And we see cyber touching every violation that we work. So whether it's counterterrorism, counterintelligence, or even down to white-collar crime, everything we do has some cyber component to it. So I'm constantly talking to, advising, and sending my agents to work with agents on other squads. You know, in violent crime, drugs, we see drug dealers talking via their gaming systems. They feel that that's a secure method of communication. So, again, a cyber component to every investigation that we see. What are our objectives? Cyber Division recently established this new motto of identify, pursue, and defeat. In the past, Cyber Division really just looked at the identification of the actors. Especially on the national security side, we wanted to know everything we could about the tactics, techniques, and procedures of the foreign adversaries. What were they doing? Who were they? Who did they work for? Where were their taskings coming from? And so we got really good at identifying actors and really exploiting who those actors were. But then, what do we do with that information? How do we get to that next step of pursue and defeat? And that's where people like me came in. So I was a counterintelligence agent by trade. I dabbled a little bit in cyber national security matters. I supervised the cyber squad in Norfolk for a year, and then I went to headquarters as a counterintelligence agent embedded in Cyber Division. So Cyber Division was looking for those next steps of pursue and defeat. So it's how do we, once we've identified these actors, how do we apply traditional counterintelligence investigative techniques to now attempt to mitigate the activities of the actors? So that's where we came in. Another important note here I have down at the bottom, Director Comey came in as director of the FBI a little over a year ago now, and he instituted these 3 priorities. So these aren't our investigative priorities. These are his overall priorities for the FBI. Number 1 being leadership. Number 2 being the integration of intelligence into operations that we do. And number 3 being cyber, because he understands that, again, cyber crosses all our investigative violations, and that agents need to understand cyber to be successful as we move forward in the FBI. This shouldn't surprise anyone in this room. This is just how much internet usage has increased really over the last 25, 30 years. This is another one that everyone in this room is familiar with. Who our average internet user is. Not security-minded, simple passwords. And this, again, is our job as security professionals to educate these individuals to make them more security-minded to help protect your networks. The Internet of Things, everything is connected to the Internet now. As we move into IPv6, your refrigerator is going to have an IP address. Your microwave is going to have an IP address. All the great things that technology is can also be exploited by nefarious actors. Again, with this group, I think that goes without saying. Information sharing, people put out way too much information on the internet. People share way too much on their social media sites. I look at my brother, who him and his wife pretty much have their relationship on Facebook. You know, when he's sitting at the airport in Jacksonville saying, oh, we're about to start our 2-week vacation down to the Dominican Republic. Okay, well, I guess I know your home's going to be empty for the next 2 weeks. So if I want to use that information for bad purposes, I can go rob his house or somebody else. What do we do as the FBI? We investigate computer intrusions, at least on my squad. So you see the bottom line, the goal of a hacker is to gain access for exploitation. But I take that a step further and say the goal is to gain legitimate credentialed access to your network. Once an individual has legitimate credentialed access, they can then move laterally throughout the network. They can take their time. We see these actors get into a system and spend weeks or months conducting reconnaissance, mapping the network, figuring out which files they want to take, and then exfiltrating files. And in most cases, the companies have no idea they've been intruded upon until we show up at their door and say, hey, we have information to indicate that your company's been intruded and you had a major exfiltration of data. The types of cyber threats that we see, they go across the spectrum on the, I guess that's on your right, hacktivism, or we term that as non-financially motivated cyber crimes. So these are anonymous, people who have really, they want to hack you just to irritate you, to conduct denial of services. Op Ferguson is a good example. Really the hacktivist taking the notion that we want to deny the services of the police department because we feel it's on our political agenda. So those are a lower priority for us, but in some significant cases we do take on those cases and attempt to identify who the actors are and prosecute them. Then we look at general cybercrime and we file these under financially motivated cybercrimes. These are really any type of crime that has any kind of financial motivation. As we move down, we see the insider threat. The insider threat is very significant. It goes back to the individual user getting not only the security professionals but also executives within companies to scrutinize a little better who it is that you're hiring, what kind of background checks you're doing on those individuals, and then even once a person is a trusted insider, to constantly check the individuals, conduct internal audits. In the FBI, we have to get polygraphed every 5 years. So it's having those checks and balances, making sure that no one individual has all the keys to the kingdom, and that you have applied the concept of least privilege, and making sure that individuals are checked on a regular basis. As we move into the other three, we look at more of your state-sponsored actors, your much more sophisticated actors. Conducting intellectual property theft is the most significant thing we've seen over the last few years. Cyber terrorism. Currently, cyber terrorism, when we think of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the level of sophistication of their attacks are not that significant yet, but we are closely monitoring their activities because we expect that they will become more sophisticated in the not too distant future. Right now, the most significant threats that we see are primarily web defacements. We recall just 2 weeks ago, we had some incidents within our area of responsibility. We had 2 restaurants in the Cincinnati area that were defaced, as well as a racetrack in the Dayton area that was also defaced. And then cyber warfare, the best example we have of that is the Sony attack, and I'll cover that in a little more detail a little bit later. As we look from the investigative side, this is how we break down the actors and by level of sophistication. So when you look at your level 1, this is really just your script kiddie, really noisy, kind of easy to detect, easy to find, and so we kind of put that in the green category of we're not that concerned about that guy because he's pretty easy to find. As we move into level 2, we get a higher level of sophistication, more difficult for us to actually track down and to bring to justice. And then we get to level 3, which is your state-sponsored actor. Again, well-funded, well-trained, very sophisticated, very quiet. These are the people that we really worry about. Another whiz-bang slide that basically shows that Even your level 1 script kiddies now can execute sophisticated attacks because all these tools are available publicly on the internet. I'm going to attempt to switch over and do this video now.
The internet has opened up a world of opportunities for businesses like ours. Businesses at the cutting edge of technology. We know the world's most high-profile companies inside out. Companies like yours. Who are we? Your worst nightmare.
Wave of attacks on businesses worldwide. Criminals have launched yet another malicious attack on, well, I think he's here.
I've got nothing to say.
Do you think your position is sustainable, sir?
I've got no comment to make.
Do you think your shareholders are going to make this up?
I certainly don't know the full extent of the intrusion.
How long will you be offline?
Do you have systems in place to stop this from happening?
Security protocols have been breached by what I can only describe as a highly sophisticated cyber attack.
We can't take all the credit. We had a little help from Jim.
Oh, hello.
One of your managers.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Jim kindly loaded our keylogger into his PC. Before catching up on some emails, giving us direct access to his mailbox and password. Jim's giving us a lot of information. Access to business contacts, emails from work colleagues. Jim's the outgoing type. Hello, Ali in IT. You look like a privileged user.
Hello. Hi, yes, this is Ellie. Okay, thank you. Yeah, no problem.
Think I'm in there. Thanks, Sally, for welcoming our custom malware into your system. We're looking forward to working closely alongside you over the next few months. There's no hurry. We have all the time in the world. After all, no one knows we're there.
We shouldn't be able to reach the live environment from here. But then why complain if we can?
I bet the vulnerability testing doesn't apply to the internal servers. Thought not.
Default password. Who forgets to change that?
We have access to all your networks. We're in the database, mapping systems, circumnavigating firewalls across the business. Oh, and did I mention, we're going global on this one.
Je l'enverrai tout de suite. Merci.
We can organize the research and development from this end. Can you forward me the contract?
そうですね、社内の方からの、承認が下りるまで他の方にちょっと、
Intellectual property, confidential documents, personal and financial data belonging to thousands of people throughout your business, from anywhere in the world. We know your secrets.
So how long has this been going on?
So this may have been going on for some time.
What are the cost implications of the attack?
He doesn't know what's hit him, or his business. IT are trying to work it out. All systems stay offline for days while they assess the extent of the attack. PR are working overtime on damage limitation.
I understand. Let's take the chance.
Then there's the emergency board meeting. Powerless as the share price falls. As customers and investors abandon ship, the board realize that the game has changed. They thought they knew the risks.
How did this happen? Who the hell is responsible?
Working at the heart of your business has been an invaluable experience. Good to know the door's always open.
So I use that to illustrate the next segment I'm going to get into, which is the most common intrusion methods that we see. And again, I have a cool guy with a cool accent who can describe these things a lot better than I can here. These are really the 5 most common intrusion vectors that we see. And the number one, phishing, spear phishing, being by far the most common intrusion vector that we see throughout our investigations. I found this from Google, just showing you how effective is phishing. And you see the numbers at the bottom of very poorly worded to the more sophisticated phishing attacks. And what I tell companies when I go out is that until these numbers are 0, phishing will remain as an effective method for nefarious actors to use to gain that initial foothold into your networks. So again, this comes down to the individual user and education of the individual user and running tests frequently to try and catch people and educate people on the dangers of clicking on nefarious links. A couple examples of phishing, and again, I'll gloss over these. I like to show these when I go out to individual companies to show the link. As you go over the link is not Facebook, is in fact a nefarious link that they're clicking on. Another example with a PDF file. This slide I like to show as an example of social engineering. This is a busy slide. There's a lot of words, but this is an ideal example. HP Gary, for those of you who don't know, is a computer security firm. And about 3 or 4 years ago, they decided they wanted to out a bunch of anonymous actors. So Anonymous decided to get back at HP Gary and compromise their network. So what you're looking at is in the span of 9 email communications, the trusted security officer, Juicy, gave up the password and changed the username for who he thought was the CEO of HB Gary, Greg, but it was actually a nefarious actor who had compromised the CEO's email account. But you see that people are in general trusting, and people want to be helpful. So how, as security professionals, did we overcome that? And that is a very difficult question to answer. People in general believe that all people are good and they have good intentions. And that's what we see here. Just yesterday, I made a call to my security company for the alarm I have at my home because I couldn't remember what my security password was. And thankfully, the woman on the phone would not give it to me when I could not give her the proper authentication. So she's going to now send me an old snail mail in which I'm going to be able to go change my security password because I can't remember what it was. But again, social engineering, the ability of actors to target your companies, identify who your C-level personnel are, identify who your IT professionals are, and then target those individuals because they know they're going to get privileged access and root access if they target those individuals because you basically control the crown jewels. Watering hole attacks, not as common, but again, something to be aware of and something to educate your personnel about. This is an example from just February of 2014 of the Veteran of Foreign Wars site that was hit. So anyone who visited that site on that day was compromised. So again, the social engineering aspect of figuring out who is our target or who are our targets, what sites do they tend to visit. If I can compromise that site, then anyone who visits that site will then be compromised. So it's casting a wider net, but still with a targeted target set in mind. Trusted third party. See the sad target. So most of us know that Target, about 6 months before the attack in December of 2013, had just invested $1.6 million in a FireEye intrusion detection system. They thought they were good. In the intervening months, they ignored some significant indicators that would have stopped this attack. But the bottom line of why we show this, though, is that trusted third party, that despite the sophisticated intrusion detection system they had on their network, there was an HVAC company that required access to Target's network. The bad guys were able to compromise the HVAC company and then in turn compromise Target's network. So for the security professionals, it's be aware of who else has access to your network and how much are they focusing on security, how much have they invested in protecting their networks in order to keep your network as secure as possible as well. Physical access was demonstrated very well in the video. The thumb drive given out for free. How many of our employees, go to conferences and get thumb drives? A lot of companies we see nowadays are actually sealing off the USB ports on their computers so employees cannot get physical access, or they just deny physical access to the USB drives. And again, we see the insider threat. Can't stress enough the ideal of really looking closely at the employees you're hiring, and then even once people are on the inside, not necessarily maintaining 100% trust with anyone. No one should be trusted. I shouldn't be trusted to access any system I want in the FBI. We have auditing systems in place to make sure I don't go to sites that I'm not supposed to. I don't look at investigations that I don't have the authority to look at. So it's continuing that line of thinking as you look at your individual users on a regular basis and then reevaluating consistently. I want to show two other common attacks that we're seeing now. The first is the ransomware attacks. These are, again, the actors conducting a compromise, generally with a phishing attack to initiate the attack, and then encrypting your files. And this is happening to individuals and companies pretty frequently these days. And then you see a message like up on the upper right-hand corner of the screen, which is pay this fine or ransom in Bitcoins, and then we'll return your data. So basically, we'll give you the encryption key so that you can decrypt the data. In general, what we see is that the company will actually provide the key if you pay the ransom, because they want to be known as a legitimate business. They want people to think that, okay, although my data is compromised right now, if I pay this fee, I'm going to get my data back, and they have confidence that they will get their data back. On the other side, on the investigative side, what do we advise companies? We can't tell you whether or not to pay the ransom. What we can tell you is try and make your information on your network as worthless as possible. So if you think about this in the context of an individual, what on your home computer makes your information valuable? What is of most value to you? To me, I say my pictures of my children, my videos, maybe my tax information. So I regularly back up my information with an external hard drive, then unplug the hard drive. So now anything that resides on my actual computer is relatively worthless. So if I get a ransomware message, I can for the most part, say, okay, I don't care, I'm not going to pay, I'm going to wipe my drive and then rebuild it from scratch. For a commercial network, it's doing regular backups, then your intermittent backups, and so you have a point where you could reestablish where you only lose maybe 24 to 48 hours of information. So you're not forced to pay that ransom. But you can see how much ransomware attacks have increased and how much we expect them to continue to increase over the next 6 months to a year. And then even when we have success, like we were able to crack one of the groups, conduct a number of arrests, but then the next group is waiting behind them to establish another ransomware attack. The other popular attack that we're seeing lately is what we call a business email compromise, formerly known as the man in the email, or we normally term as man in the middle attacks. So someone, again, compromising an email within your system and then masquerading as one of those individuals, getting in the middle of an email string. So it's not just a phishing email that's individually crafted to look like it's coming from your CEO. It's actually coming from your CEO. We see companies will send a bank account, send money to this account. And then the next day, the nefarious actor comes back and says, no, I made a mistake on that account, send it to this account. And again, people want to be helpful. People are understanding. And they say, oh, it must have just been a fat finger mistake. Fix the account number, change it, the money goes and money's gone. And that's one of the problems with a lot of these investigations. We conduct these investigations frequently, and the money disappears, within hours. And it quickly goes overseas, and our ability to work with foreign police departments and to actually get the money locked down in foreign banks is very difficult. So even if in the future we are able to identify the actors, the money's gone and the companies do not get the money back. And unfortunately, I don't want to hear that, but that is kind of the reality. Kind of shift gears now. We looked at the criminal threats. I want to look at the national security threats. And what would a presentation be without a quote from Sun Tzu? So to kind of give you the evolution of cyber division in the FBI, about 4 years ago, we used to have a mix of criminal and national security intrusions. We were doing crimes against children was probably our number one cyber criminal activity that we investigated. And then cyber division said, we need to really focus on the national security threat. At the time, China was eating our lunch. They were conducting intellectual property theft in the realm of terabytes upon terabytes of information each week that was being stolen from U.S. businesses. So we actually moved away a lot of the criminal intrusion activity to the criminal side. So internet theft, identity theft, and crimes against children all moved to the criminal investigative division and away from cyber. So we could focus on national security computer intrusions. About a year and a half ago, really I would say when Target and Home Depot got hit, cyber division realized, well, this is what the American public expects us to investigate now. So again, we shifted back, and I call it the pendulum shift, went back to 50% criminal, 50% national security. And they refined the national security mission even more. So the group that was identified, that we outed with the indictments, the 5 Chinese actors, that particular group was being investigated by 43 different field offices in the FBI out of 56 field offices. So cyber said, we're not doing this in a smart way. We have to figure out these national security actors and be smarter about how we're conducting the investigations. So we created what's called the cyber threat team model. And cyber, again, defined 68 different threats and then identified which field offices were in the best position and had the best expertise to investigate these particular actors. So we have now what we call STRAT, or strategic field offices, and TACs, which are tactical field offices, who work together to address these threats. So, for example, I am a TAC for 2 different threats in Cincinnati. And so if I see activity from an actor that I'm not a strat or TAC for, then we conduct the initial investigation, then forward that information to whatever office is either the strategic or the tactical office for that threat. And the current thinking is that that is the most efficient way to investigate these actors. So we're still doing liaison locally, but because cyber is a national and international threat, we still feel that this is the best way to look at these threats. National security threat is commonly referred to as advanced persistent threat. But again, it comes down to the initial intrusion vector is most significantly spear phishing attacks. So again, it comes down to that individual user clicking on that link and compromising the network, and the actors then having access to the network. And this is kind of how it works. They will spend time, the reconnaissance phase is really the initiation of this, of them doing their social engineering, looking at the system, figuring out who do we need to focus on to get that initial intrusion vector and get access to the network, who are privileged users, and then you see the initial intrusion vector, which is that, in most cases, that spear phishing email. Once they're in, again, you saw in the video, they can take their time because there's no rush. No one knows they're there. They're behind the firewalls. They're moving, mapping the network, again, figuring out exactly what information they want to steal, putting it in RAR files, and shipping it out. And occasionally we see network administrators will see the activity when the RAR file leaves, because it's a large file leaving their network. But in most cases, they don't. And it's because of monitors that we have in place or other government agencies have in place that spark the notifications, and then we're going out knocking on the company's door. One good news to this is that companies' attitudes have changed significantly in the last 4 years. When I was a supervisor in Norfolk, I still remember doing my first victim notification, and the company was, beyond belief that they couldn't believe that they were intruded upon. I had a network administrator who was shaking, sitting at the end of the table, thinking he was going to lose his job, because it was all about blame, and it was all about why us, and we don't want anybody to know about this. We want to keep this hush hush because we're afraid about how this is going to affect our company's bottom line. How is this going to affect our stock prices? If our stockholders think that we're weak, we're not secure, we didn't put money into the security of our network, what is that going to do to us? We've seen that paradigm change over the last 4 years, particularly with the indictments of the Chinese actors, was really the turning point. Because we found companies that were willing to stand up and say, we've taken this long enough, we're not going to take it anymore, we want to do something about it, we want to take action. So U.S. government we're willing to cooperate with you. You can look at our systems, figure out how these actors got in, determine that it was this actor who conducted this initial intrusion and then stole this data on this day. And if you can actually track that through our log files, you're more than welcome to do that. So it was companies like U.S. Steel and Alcoa and the Pittsburgh U.S. Attorney's Office picking up that ball, running with it, and getting us those indictments. Unfortunately, most of those actors, or probably none of those actors, will ever see the inside of a U.S. courtroom, but it was a major step towards that pursue and defeat the goals of cyber division. Destructive malware. This is an example of the Sony attack in December of 2014. The significance of this attack, as different from the Chinese intrusion attacks that I just talked about, is that this is the first example of destructive malware that we saw on U.S. soil. And this freaked everybody out. Because if Sony could get intruded upon and could have all their computers wiped, why couldn't they pick any other company, or why couldn't they focus on the U.S. government? Back in March of 2013, North Korea attacked South Korea with a cyber attack. And they focused on 3 major banks and 2 major television networks. They wiped over 33,000 computers. They denied access to ATMs for about 4 hours. And on that day, we had major U.S. banks again calling to FBI headquarters and asking if this attack happened in the United States, would we be able to prevent it? And then in December 2014, we see the same attack occur at Sony Pictures Entertainment, most likely because of the release of a movie. They were not happy. But you see that, again, a complicated slide, but it shows the same methodology that we've seen with other national security computer intrusions. It's that initial attack vector, get in, move laterally throughout the network, figure out what they want. In this case, it was embarrassing emails and PII about individuals who worked at Sony. Get that information out on the internet once it fit their purpose, and then initiate the malware and execute the malware. And you can see this was kind of how the attack worked, and it follows that APT model. The only difference is the destruction of data on that last little piece there, as opposed to the normal APT activity of building those back doors, being able to exploit the network later, but generally being quiet and not doing any destruction, just stealing data but not destroying a network. That was the major difference here. The good news here was the cooperation between Sony and the government. Sony was very open with us about the attack. They welcomed us with open arms and allowed us to conduct our investigation and be able to quickly get to identification of the actors. So how are we dealing with this as a U.S. government? I've already talked a lot about the identify, pursue, and defeat. Prioritization of the threats. From the criminal side, it's difficult for me to figure out what rises to the level of an investigation. I just got a phone call while I was driving up here with a company that has lost only about $20,000. Now, in the scheme of, for most of us, $20,000 seems like a lot, but in the scheme of an investigation, it's really not that much. But what am I interested in? I'm interested in tactics, techniques, and procedures of the actors. Ultimately, we're interested in identifying the actors, but we're looking for trends. We're looking for, again, what are they doing? And it's really a consolidation of information, of attacks across a large area. And that's where we have IC3, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is located in West Virginia. So in most of the cases where it's a smaller intrusion, we'll send the companies and tell them to file complaints with IC3. Then they consolidate the data and they can see across a broad spectrum who else is getting similar attacks, who is seeing the same TTPs. And then once they consolidate 4, 5, 6 attacks that have the same signatures, then they can send it out to a field office and say, here, this looks like it originates from your area of responsibility. And you see partnerships. Us getting out and giving out this message to individuals like yourselves, and then you turning around and going to your users and explaining the threats and explaining how to attempt to mitigate the threats is all part of our strategy to mitigate this significant threat. And then the responsibilities and how we break it down, the FBI and DOJ being the investigative arms after an intrusion has occurred, DHS really controlling infrastructure protection, and then Department of Defense, NSA, CIA, really doing your foreign monitoring, foreign protection, and then passing off information that they detect to us to conduct the investigations. The NCI-JTF is another major tool that the U.S. government has. This is the National Computer Investigative Joint Task Force located in Chantilly, Virginia. I had the privilege of working one floor under these guys and worked very closely with them. And what it is, it's one organization with representation from all these different government agencies, because cyber is still so relatively new that you have a lot of overlap, a lot of people trying to figure out exactly where their lane is. And this helps define those lanes and helps us work together a little better so that we're not seeing a duplication of effort. Because we see a lot of that in the government. We see a lot of duplication of effort, people really looking for the same thing. So if we can deconflict in any way, this is one organization that helps us on the cyber side do that more efficiently. The minimizing risk, you guys all understand this. This is, again, when I go out and talk to companies, this is what I tell them to do. You've heard this enough. Individuals, same thing. I've already talked about IC3. Again, write this down. Tell your users. And if you see things, nefarious activity that probably doesn't rise to the level of an investigation, you can reach out to IC3 and file a complaint. My pitch for InfraGard, I don't know how many InfraGard members we have in the room. How many InfraGard members do we have in the room? We have a lot. Thank you. I appreciate your membership. I appreciate your participation in the program. For those of you who aren't members, understand that InfraGard is a public-private partnership that's kind of overseen by the FBI, but it's run by the individual members within InfraGard. InfraGard was established, it actually started in the Cleveland field office, I don't know how many years ago. But it was started as more of an IT protection group. It has expanded and now looks at 16 different critical infrastructure sectors that it seeks to protect. And so it is a sounding board for individuals throughout the security community and all of those infrastructure, work in all different U.S. infrastructures so they can communicate, share intelligence, share information, and really help protect. It's that collaboration that we've harped on so much. Mandatory funding slide, and that's what I have. Are there any questions? Well, again, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate the invitation, and I hope you learned something from my presentation. Thank you.